right, guys, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order for the Human Relations Commission, 8/11/2020. I would request that the staff confirmation of the Kansas Open Meeting Act be properly provided.
Yes, it was.
All right. Now, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Cadle,
Here.
Commissioner Leanders, Commissioner Shelberg,
Here.
Commissioner Booker,
Here.
Commissioner Holtburse, Commissioner Marco, Commissioner Burchill,
Here.
Youth on Board Alicia Peppers.
Not here. Well, we have a quorum, so we will continue on for the approval of the minutes from 3/10/2020. It's been a while. It has been a while. And that would be page 2, the second, or page 3. And do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and now for the approval of the minutes from July 27th special meeting, page 2. And can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Aye.
And all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right. Make sure I'm reading from the right one. We'll move right into section 3, the unfinished or other business. The commissioner concerns continued. Not sure about this one.
Yeah, so I just want to give a quick review for the commissioners that weren't in attendance for the special meeting. It was on item 2.1 for that special meeting under new business. Commissioner Shelberg expressed concern regarding the community relations staff's ability to keep up with serving the community due to the work share and the differences in our time and the office hours that we have, the changes that have been made temporarily, and the unfilled position in our office. And Commissioner Marco also expressed concern about the number of people affected by evictions and growing need for the office. A request was made to meet with the director of the department, and she is here today to be able to answer any questions and address the commission.
I don't have a prepared statement, so Lauren Driscoll, Director of Community and Development Services. Julia, also that other item that was in their packet regarding board and commission, do you want to handle that at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. You just also got an additional handout today that we can go over as well. I guess I am happy to answer any questions or concerns. Maybe just addressing work share. It has not been an easy few months. If you've watched the city commission meeting, you've heard about people concerned about mowing, access to parks and recreational programs that they depend on. Equally, how the community does business through building, construction, safety, fire. Just there's not one department in the entire city that was not affected. I can't say, well, they didn't have anybody laid off or they didn't have to go into work share. Every director is on work share. There are a tiny group of individuals due to their retirement date and the program they're in that opted out of any of this. And I think you can all understand why if you've ever been part of an organization, but it is a micro group. But in general, the entire organization has been affected. So it is not something proportionately applied to community relations. And we have tried to work through this as best as possible during these unique situations. One of the things that I've tried to do since becoming director is really pulling Julia and Evelyn into understanding why they're a part of the department. Before I got to the city of Salina, I understand that it used to be its own department, much bigger staff. You know, I do not have a time machine and I cannot change those decisions, but what I am very conscious of is trying to bring their education expertise into the rest of the things that we do. And our department is one of the only that has had diversity and equity training with our staff, particularly my inspectors. So understanding maybe cultural situations as they go into homes and businesses to work. We also make sure to have translation services and try to provide as many of our building documents as possible for those who need a secondary language. Equally, that staff has shared that information with Julia and Evelyn so that they can understand the way the other scenario goes. And I think there's been a lot of benefit, even just during the last few months of kind of understanding, you know, how do we deal with things like mowing? And, you know, it's interesting when you start to see culture and how different people feel about the exterior of their home. And it's not just a socioeconomic thing. And just trying to work through some of those challenges. We have had a position that's been unfilled in there for quite some time. That position is fully funded for the 2021 budget. The division is fully funded for the 2021 budget. There has never been and has not been any discussion about not funding that position or the division. And there has been zero discussion about dissolving this board. I know I've gotten some questions about that. I believe it was brought up at the city commission last night. I'm really not sure how those rumors were started. That's really unfortunate. I know some people have voiced a concern that we're not as vocal as a department, as a division right now, related to the death of George Floyd or Black Lives Matter. I am happy to have that conversation with you. Both Evelyn and I, and talking with Julia and talking with Mike Scragg, there are only so many resources. And when I look at the resources right now between police department, city manager's office, and outside entities that are looking at the effects of policing, the police system on minorities, there are still a lot of other issues affecting people in our community that are beyond that. And there are things that the division has always been working on. You know, you brought up housing and the concerns about related to excessive housing concerns, whether it's through foreclosures or leases not being renewed or some very bad actors. During COVID, there were several gubernatorial declarations made dealing with utilities and other things like rent during COVID that we had to stay on top of. With only 2 people in the office and only so many hours in a day, I want to make sure that the services we're providing to those people are able to stay those services. And if I look at the amount of resources that are dedicated right now to that issue, is it enough? No. But I can't take the resources of those 2 individuals away from the services that we're dependent upon for. If we had more available resources, we may be able to do more. And when we are fully staffed, we have done. I mean, Evelyn and Julia have done some great programs and outreach that is definitely beyond what we've done in the past, working with the school district, working with other businesses we haven't worked with in the past. And we are trying to create some more partnerships. If you've ever worked in government, it is hard to find resources sometimes. But we are looking at forming partnerships with possibly Kansas Wesleyan and maybe getting an intern from the social work department that could also help us with those types of training activities. You know, and I have discussed with the chief, you know, maybe we need to have some additional training and partnerships with PD. You know, how can we better that relationship? There are a lot of things that I look forward to in 2021. And that's just a little bit of background about where we're at and how we've gotten to this point. And be happy to answer any questions you have.
I'm just curious, when you said translation services, and I know it's came up before in our meetings, that this department is providing a majority of those. Is there any reason why a community that has such a heavily based, Spanish community, there's only one person providing those services? Couldn't that be better spread out, especially right now? Wouldn't that be more resourceful to have other options?
Well, I think there's two things. There's what's interpretation and there's translation. So translation can actually be outsourced. And I will admit to using those interspersed. But if I'm like in the conversations I've had with Julia and other departments, there's a big difference between somebody having the skill level and knowledge to actually do interpretation,
I'm aware of
which is
that.
live, and doing translation. So we have provided to other departments, and there are resources in the organization to use outside parties for translation. There's also, HR provides an entire list to all department directors of everybody in the organization who speaks multiple languages.
Is
So
there
those can be
currently quite a
used.
few of those individuals then?
Yeah, there's a good handful. I mean, it's not a secret. I'm sure I could ask HR if you'd have that, but I mean, there's over 20.
Okay.
And do they share those duties too? Like they're basically kind of helping her out a little bit too with some of those translations, or?
I can't speak for other departments. As director and as, supervisor to Julia's department, if I start to see that time become excessive, that's often when I have a conversation and go, there are other people that can do this. There are also a lot of services, and we've been trying to work with other departments. Particularly, you see translation and interpretation the most at front counter scenarios. And there are websites like Babbel that, for that quick back and forth of, is my permit approved? Or will somebody be coming out to the house? Those kinds of questions can a lot of times be done through some of those digital services. And sometimes it's just kind of working through it, but in those more specific situations where you need detailed things, like we have some of our ADA language that we've laid out for developers, or not developers, I should say contractors, that we've specifically done in Spanish and had those translated and verified, things like that, because we needed them in writing. They need to be more complex. And Julia does have a significant amount of experience in government, and working in our department, we do touch a lot of the other departments where not all of them do. So particularly for interpretation stuff, she will get pulled in because of her expertise and her fluency.
But in times like this, there could be a possibility that would remove someone from being present in their office.
Correct.
That's kind of a concern.
Yes, I know, I do completely understand, but that's where we have those backup secondary resources. No different than having one person in the office who's a notary public and won't be in till the next day. But the schedules we've set up, there's only one day off in between, and there is overlap in that employment group. So she may not be here on Monday, but Evelyn is, or Thursday, but there are overlap, and there are those additional backup resources.
I don't know. I'm just super concerned. One other thing is we have 17 open cases right now. And to me, that's the majority of why we're here. So if there's any resources being taken away from those right now, that is kind of concerning, especially of how many of them are related to housing.
I guess I'm misunderstanding the question. You're concerned about resources being taken away from the division or their time?
I am concerned with the staff being taken away from their office to provide resources for other departments.
Okay. Well, I think in some extreme circumstances where we're dealing with a pandemic and you may have a citizen in here who needs help, we have never tried to deny somebody help. And if it is a significant amount of work, that's where communication happens between Julia, myself, Evelyn, and those other department heads that maybe this needs to be rescheduled to a different time. And as I mentioned, there are those backup services. And as far as putting time into those cases, I believe you've gotten more cases to review in the last couple of weeks than you have in a significant amount of time. So we are putting as much into this as we possibly can right now. And we are working within the very difficult constraints we've been given.
I would like, first of all, to thank you for coming tonight, taking time out of your schedule to meet with us. As a volunteer member of this commission, I know that my term's up this month, and I know it's up to the mayor and city to whether or not I'm reappointed. I did apply, but just publicly, I want to make sure, first of all, that you know how much I appreciate the work of your staff. When I look at the cases and investigate those, it takes me hours to go through those documents before I can make a finding. And I would shudder on how long it would take if I had to collect those documents initially. I've always found them put together professionally. I've yet to have to call the office and ask for additional information. I mean, it's been totally complete. They've been very, very difficult, but it's the professionalism and how it's been set up from your staff, both Julia and Evelyn. I just want you to know publicly that I think you got some top-notch employees there, first and foremost. Partnerships with Wesleyan and the social work program is, I think, something we were interested in, and I know that Wesleyan is up front, and would love to help also look for some other partnerships. And I appreciate the COVID stuff. One of the questions that came up, though, and I was a little confused, because I've been just focusing on the investigations, is how is, I know we're getting some outside funding for this department. Could you just kind of give an overview of how that works and what it's based on?
Outside funding for the department?
For the department?
You mean the small amount that HUD supplies for each case that is complete?
How does that work? And just a quick overview.
So as the cases are processed, whether, well, actually, Evelyn's probably the best person to go
Okay.
through this, and I think we just got our most recent numbers, so I don't want to misspeak.
Sure. With the HUD contract, it's basically, it goes by, cases can be conciliated. They can be, there can be found probable cause or no probable cause. And then even after that, they can go to public hearing. So we'll get a certain amount, for conciliation. I think it's $3,500. And then as cases age, if it goes to the point where you all make a decision, the older the case is, the amount will go down depending on, how old it is. So depending on what the finding is, or not depending on what the finding is, when we get a finding, depending on how old it is, we'll get a certain amount of money. Once it gets, say it's probable cause, and then it goes into an enforcement phase. So if we enforce it, say it gets conciliated after the finding, or it goes to public hearing, we get a $5,000 enforcement bonus for that. If it's withdrawn, I think we get $1,500, Julia? Yeah. So, because people can withdraw. So there are different kind of levels, and then, so depending on how many cases you get, kind of how long, they're in there, that kind of depends, that starts to add up to what you get for that year, and then HUD will give us the contract for that year with that amount, and so that's kind of the gist of it.
And that
Am I
amount is
forgetting anything?
only housing.
Yeah, no, I understand it's limited,
So it does not
yes.
cover our
Yes.
our employment cases or accessibility cases.
Yeah.
And then we are obligated as a FAP to contribute a certain amount of financing to those operations. So the additional legal costs that are covered, so when we need to bring a specialized attorney for those more difficult situations, the city is covering that through our budget, and a variety of other things. Our HUD reimbursement is helpful, but it is definitely not enough to cover the division or department expenses. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to seem distracted, but earlier this year, just in doing budgeting numbers and just doing an overlook, if you took the last 5 years and averaged the number of cases that we were able to complete, it was 6 a year. I think it was mentioned earlier that you have 17 right now. We have been pushing very hard to still keep that same level of professionalism, to get that same high-quality material both to you and working with our citizens, but getting more because it's that important.
Oh, certainly, and I'm sorry if I implied anything other than that. That wasn't my intent. It was just brought up during the concerns, and I just thought it'd be nice to have a quick overview of that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
could
And thank you
say-
for the compliment. They are pretty darn amazing, so.
They are. I could say, haven't been on the board for about almost 3 years now, about 3 years. This year has had more cases come across for decisions than I think we've, regularly. So you guys are really pushing through with everything going on. So I'll give you that. That's a fact. And you can't really, you can't guesstimate or even assume how many cases you're going to get in a year, because you just don't know. And I feel like this past year, even the past 6 months, as we've seen an uptake in people, and that could be because they have the information that there is somewhere they can go, that it's getting out there more that we are here. And so that's definitely a good thing. And I do love to hear that you have that spot open still to be filled. Probably not until next year, though, or?
I am
this
trying
year's been
very
shot.
hard to make that case. And some of it just comes down to the economics of how the city's budget's playing out this year. There are a lot of moving pieces at the moment, but I can tell you that it is funded
Okay.
for next year, and I'm very hopeful we could even fill that position sooner. I can also tell you during the city shutdown that lasted roughly 4 weeks, I was in the office and I took all the calls and was able to coordinate with Evelyn and make sure that people still got their paperwork. We still were trying to process things. I will not say that it moved at the pace when everybody's in the office, but we wanted to make sure that people didn't feel like they couldn't get the resources they needed during those complicated times, so we were able to do that.
Just a question. So you said that position is funded for next year. Was it not funded for this year? Was that part of the issue?
No, it was funded for this year, but many of us had hiring freezes within our department, so those
Okay.
numbers could be used to cover budgetary issues.
Okay, so
makes
is that
sense.
like a general fund or so?
Yes.
Okay.
So all positions were frozen in, it was probably January, and then those monies were used to fill budget gaps. Many of us depleted several, it has been a challenge just trying to kind of make all these pieces work at the moment. And I think, there are so many unexpected things with this pandemic of new federal monies being introduced and different types of payroll relief and different types of unemployment plans, and trying to kind of see how that all works out. So I foresee that even 2020's budget is going to keep evolving to the end of the year. I know last night the city commission met and was already talking about 2021, but also 2020, and what is sales tax looking like? That's a huge part of this conversation. There's a lot of questions right now, and I think one of the reasons we're hesitant is we can see an uptick based on federal monies we've received and on sales tax that have come in, but we also haven't seen the impact of the $600 unemployment check on the community as a whole and how that could affect sales tax. And we're also not sure what the virus is going to do as the months get colder.
Understandable. One other question was, is there any way for the department to have access to the emergency funds that were given to the city and the county to staff it fully?
So when I say that we're seeing an uptick in revenue, is not only those sales numbers, or sales tax numbers, I should say, but some of the funds that were that used for emergency COVID leave. So the city gave all employees 2 weeks of paid leave, plus the federal, which is kind of complicated. We're a smaller organization, but as a government, it's not quite the same because we don't get the same tax relief. But we still have to do that. So there was 4 weeks of that leave, and there are several other very specific related costs to the pandemic that were reimbursed through that COVID leave. So it definitely has helped to secure kind of the biggest gaping hole.
Okay.
But if you've been part of this discussion in the community,
Yeah.
we have a bit of an expectation and revenue issue. And I there are challenges in kind of meeting our expectations of what services we want to provide, and of those services, which ones are more important.
Yeah.
And those, maybe what we think are more important are not necessarily the same as others. And I put it out there, I think that's why people need to show up at the budget
Yeah.
discussion and explain, because staff can push that, but when you fill a room with people to talk about a baseball stadium, I don't know why we don't have a room full of people talking about some of these other things.
Understandable.
Agreed.
So I'm trying to make sure that we're talking about the same money. I was at a commission meeting previously, and they did talk about how the county was given money, and then they were exploring ways to use that money for masks. It was someone's suggestion and other things. I was just curious, so that portion that will be given to the city is off the table for doing something like this?
So the money you're talking about is money that was delivered through the CARES Act. That's where most of this money is coming from. So that money was given to the county, and they had kind of like a two-part process. They formed something called the Spark Committee, and that was a citizen, members of the city, county officials, and the first go at it was they took reimbursement requests from municipalities. And that's primarily because some of the tax breaks that were set up for businesses, we're required to comply with them, but we would never see the tax benefit because we don't, as a government, pay those types of taxes. So they took reimbursements from the city, the county, and the school district. And I believe maybe some from the hospital. I haven't been part of the committee as a whole, but I have been tracking our stuff. And that first round of expenses were things we've already spent money on.
Okay.
So receipts, invoices, the whole gamut. Those were approved, and then they went to the second round. And the second round was essentially all outside parties, and so it could be nonprofits, businesses, and then those same entities who were awarded before, if we knew we had other expenses that we needed and would spend before the end of 2020, that's part of the big part of it, and they were related to the language in the Spark guidelines, we could put in for those. They, of course, went through the city manager's office, but you couldn't fund like a particular department or fund a particular employee. It was basically you could apply for things that help work from home scenarios. So if you had to have remote employees, things that, of course, like PPE and directly related to medical assistance, and then things that would increase the availability of services and stuff digitally. But it was very tough competition. That money was fully awarded, and I can tell you several of the things that I was hoping to see did not get funded. And the city had to submit those and went into the same group, and an independent group of citizens went through those. And if you are interested, those are available from Salina Media Connection.
Okay. Yeah.
Do I have any more questions for Lauren? You did say something about a police training program that you had looked into, maybe getting some of the diversity training into the department. Is that something that they'd been discussing, like they're serious about looking into, or?
I don't want to speak for PD, so, because that is theirs. But,
Okay.
I mean, we have been having discussions about the training that we provide to outside agencies, that we, do we need to bring that to the whole organization? I believe we've had other local entities near and around Salina contact us about that. I think that's something we're looking forward to in 2021. I would be heartbroken to see us put that kind of effort into something and not have all of our employees back.
Yeah.
I want to get the biggest bang for our buck. So
sure.
if we're going to do something like that, I'm also hopeful too, and one of the reasons I'd like to wait till 2021 and not too late is one of the ways we saved a lot of money was not filling positions. So it's not just us. I mean, I have 4 more upstairs, and I know many other departments. So getting those people into the organization and making sure that that's understood, that it's part of our culture.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just have one question for you. As we move forward with the pandemic, do you foresee the other departments, and I'm just kind of piggyback on earlier before with the interpretation translation, do you foresee the other departments particularly coming together to maybe partnership to maybe help with those, some of those tasks?
I hope so. Having come from a place, I spent 11 years in Alaska, where the Anchorage School District had, 19 spoken languages, and many of those of indigenous people. And being a bit of a larger county that I was part of, for instance, on transportation funding for Title IV, I made sure all of our ambulances, for instance, had like cards that you could flick that asked basic questions in different languages. But those, some of those, besides being federal mandates, were often things that were requested and identified as need. I think one of the challenges that I find in this building is, outside of some very particular circumstances, and I think related to Julia, it's the complicated stuff. A lot of them are making do with Babbel and some things like that. Do I wish, as an organization as a whole, and I think it will come with time. It's a cultural shift that we start to have more documents available in secondary languages. Yes. It is a challenge. I think it's becoming more of a thing. And I think we will develop that. But at the moment, we try to work together, and we try to be as helpful as possible. At the end of the day, as much as I'm just as concerned as Julia and Evelyn's boss about how much time they're spending doing those other things, sometimes it is a really big legal deal that somebody at least can understand where to get to. And if they have to leave the building not getting that thing that they need, that is not okay to me. So
Hopefully it doesn't take that for more people to be in the building, and a little bit more diversity with hiring possibly within the city would be helpful.
yes, I think there are definitely, and I think we talked about it a little bit before, is we went to Garden City about a year ago and really learned about some of the practices they have in place dealing with such a diverse environment. I know we've suggested some of those things, and I'm hopeful that those will move forward. And I think we just have to keep talking about this. I don't think somebody needs to die to keep having this conversation, and I think that's why this board is so important, and that's why I think what this division does is so important, because you start to connect these really difficult topics to talk about to very real everyday things.
Quality of life.
Yes.
Everyone deserves it.
I'm on camera, but when you say the word race or racism, there are a lot of people who get turned off or completely sidetracked into a mindset that we can't have a conversation anymore. But when we talk about housing and you not getting access to housing or getting dismissed from a job for those particular reasons because of your gender or sexual orientation or your color or those things, and even if we can't help you, at least having that conversation and starting to answer some of those questions is just so critical for people not being marginalized.
True. Well said.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate your time. Sorry I had I have a lot to
No,
say, but I appreciate your
no.
time.
I got questions, and I'm happy with that. I'll answer as best as I can, and I am happy to spend the time with you guys, so.
Do you foresee yourself attending more meetings in the future, or having time to pop in every once in a while?
I am happy to be at the disposal of the board. Have you ever had your boss be at your meetings? I try really hard to respect my staff that manages their boards. Our department manages 7.
Yeah.
So I will go when needed, but I also try to kind of give them their respect. It's the relationship you have with your staff is really important, and it's kind of hard when I'm here.
Yeah. Understandable.
You have amazing staff, and it's been a pleasure working with them. Thank you.
We are definitely blessed, and this is not easy work, and the training and the understanding and the empathy to be able to do this and the skill set is very rare, and we are very blessed to have them, and I am happy to tell anybody who will listen about that.
Agreed. Any more questions for Lauren? Anybody else? Well, thank you again for coming up here and
No problem.
helping
And
us
like I
out.
said, if you guys need me here, Evelyn and Julio are good about letting me know if something's on the agenda, or please just, I will be here.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Now, got through the concerns, so let's take a look at 3.2, the case docket log update.
So I just wanted to take a moment and review this briefly with you guys. We did close about 17 cases for the year 2019-2020, and that was the majority of them was through HUD, so housing cases. As you can see, employment, I have them in yellow on the screen. And there was some that came to the commission and came back. NPC means no probable cause. Some were withdrawn from. That means that the complainant decided to just close the case. They didn't want to move forward. And a number of them were also conciliated, which means we were able to come together with the other party and have a settlement that both parties agreed to. So as you can see, there were several employment ones closed in this year, and I just focused on 2020. We do still currently have about 5 still open in employment. I do know that we are, you guys keep on getting the emails from us of you were randomly chosen, and if you guys are willing to, if you guys have the time and are available to read a case. And so I'd say currently we have about, would it be 4 that are kind of waitlisted, so we already have them ready for you guys. We just
Oh, boy.
are trying to space them out a little bit for you guys, and not bombard you guys as much. So we just as equally appreciate the work you guys do as volunteers on this commission. If we go down to housing, you can see that there was definitely a lot of housing cases that were closed. In 2020, we still have, so the purple ones, PC, it means that they went to the commission, so you guys read over them and believe that there was probable cause, and so they're still open, but they're now kind of on a different level than the other cases. And so we have a couple of those, we have 4 of those, and then we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that haven't even gone to you guys yet. So they're either, we're either working on trying to conciliate or they're in open investigation. Investigation has been a little interesting since we're not going out in person. We are trying to do everything over the phone, requesting things through fax, scanning things, trying to just take everything, every precaution to make sure people feel comfortable working with us and keeping everyone safe. And so that has made things a little interesting, but we're still able to get things completed. And like I said, we have 4 waitlisted right now to go before you guys. And then we have 1 public accommodation that, again, it's open, but it came back probable cause. So we're just waiting on that one to go. It's still kind of on a different level, and we're just kind of waiting to hear back on that case. Do you guys have any questions specifically to the docket?
With the library opening back up for limited hours, do you foresee that being a resource for community members, just because not everyone has access to a printer or email or any of the things that you guys are kind of being forced to communicate with?
I mean, we get people in that ask about, hey, where can I do this? Where can I do this? So we have had people while the library was closed that have asked about different tax forms and stuff like that. So I'm sure that'll be a good thing for a lot of people.
Do you have any other questions on the docket?
So all the ones that are closed, pretty much, especially the ones that are without, like withdrawal without resolution. Now, those people, the people themselves decided not to pursue it anymore. Do they have the option to come back in and try again, and, you know, come back later, so to speak? I was always wondering about that.
We do send out a
Okay.
letter to them, letting them know what their, you know, what their options are,
Okay.
depending on what their situation
Because I was
is.
just kind of curious if like some of them withdrew it because they didn't want to have to get out or come and be around people, or, and I wouldn't want to see them, you know, still being, you know, taken advantage of or walked on just because they didn't want to come out because of this pandemic or anything like that. So I don't know if there was anything in place to let people know, you know, there's no time limit here. You know, you can, obviously we have them from 2018, so I mean, the person's not stressed that they need to come out right now. If they have a complaint, that they can still file it and take that time. So I just didn't know if,
We sent out the letter, basically, like, when it comes to housing, they have a year from the last occurrence of this alleged discrimination.
Okay.
Or if it's employment, and they would have 6 months.
160.
oh,
I'm sorry.
oh, there you go, now I can hear you.
So basically, we sent out a letter, and let me just repeat it again. They have, if it's housing, they have a year from the last occurrence of discrimination that they're alleging, and then for employment, it'd be 6 months. Public accommodation, 6 months. So, you know, even if they say it was 2 months after the last occurrence, it was a housing thing, and then they withdrew, then they would have, you know, that 10 more months or so to reopen it and start over.
Gotcha. Okay, nothing else. Looks like you still got a lot of work on your hands. Like I said, that the investigating has got to be a lot tougher now. So, good work and good luck.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Did anybody have any other questions about the logs? No? And we'll move up to the 3.3, the upcoming outreach events and activities. I don't know if this one's that big, if we have a lot of events or activities coming up, but
No, we did have, all activities have been postponed
That's what I
until, you know, we'll definitely keep you guys updated and let you know. But way back, we did agree to just keep that as a standing item on the agenda, just in case somebody wanted to share something. But I do want to take this time to go over, Lauren Driscoll's going to come back up and talk to you guys a little bit about the email that was sent out to you guys with the documentation. And so, yeah.
I did have one question about activities or what have you, because we talked about the schools and getting involved with them, and I do know they're partially coming back now. Are we still looking to partner with any of them to do any of those classes, or is it just too much right now to try to, like, because we were doing, like you did the class with, what was the grade school?
Third grade at
Yeah,
Houston.
yeah, and things like that. And we talked about getting into the high school and stuff. Is that still a possibility, or is that something that we're tabling?
I think once we, you know, come back to full-time, we'll definitely be looking into more of that. I know that we're both we tag team on the site council for Hughesner, and then I was asked to sit on the site council for South High, so hopefully
okay.
we'll have some,
Good
you
deal.
know, some more opportunities.
Well, anything we can do to help. Like I
Yeah.
said, we're down to come out and sit in the booth and help you guys out and try to give out any of that information. You know, just
We appreciate it.
I'm sure all of us feel the same way, that you just let us know and we're there, because like I said, you're only two people. So anything you need help with.
Thank you.
Okay, so you will have received in an email a lovely packet. If you're looking at this and going, why did you send me this? Most people aren't aware, but the city does have an ethics code. And in that, it says that thou shalt have training. If you have sat on this board before, you know that we typically do training with you guys in August, or I should say September. Since we run a number of these, and this is particularly, I will say, some experience that I brought to the table dealing with planning commissions, it is really, really important that you guys are aware of this kind of stuff, but we also have a lot of other boards and commissions throughout the organization, so maybe some not so as aware. So we will still be doing your training with you guys in this early fall. We like to have all your positions filled. Usually August is the big reappointment time. I believe it's August 24th is the meeting that's going to happen at. And then your next scheduled meeting after that, depending on things, is usually when we do that basic training. And we go through Parley Pro and a little bit of organizational awareness along with ethics and things like that. If we get you, just for those of you who don't know or haven't participated, if we get you in between those trainings, we try to, COVID hasn't made this easy, but we try to quarterly pull our 7 boards and commissions, our newly appointed members, and we hold kind of a little brown bag lunch and kind of go through the same thing. Not quite as in depth, but we do that. But we are taking a step forward as an organization as a whole, and each new board member, if you're already seated, that's why you're getting this, has been asked as a volunteer board member to, one, note on this document that you have received these necessary documents. That includes the city's ethics policy. That includes the policy related to serving. That includes the Citizen's Guide to Open Government, and that actually comes from the AG's office. It's actually a really good guide. I have referenced it for folks many a times. And the volunteer boards and commissions policy really kind of outlines the rules and regulations. So if you're not as familiar with what's the difference between a regular meeting and a special meeting and who gets to vote and stuff like that, some of that is outlined in there. Not as many boards have bylaws as you may think, but some also have bylaws in which those sometimes can contradict some of these things, and many of them need to be updated. But one of the reasons for doing this is kind of saying, these ones you gotta know. and they're critical and they apply to everybody. So it's asking that you to acknowledge you've seen them, or received them, I should say, that you've read them and you understand them. Please, if you have any questions about these, we're happy to go over them. Like I said, we'll do training here in your next meeting or so. But we are happy anytime for you to call us. It doesn't happen here as much, but I tell any commissioner, if you feel like you are dealing with a conflict of interest, it is always helpful to call staff ahead of time, because we can help you kind of talk through that. And if we need to get legal counsel to review that, it is much easier than trying to do it on the floor. Now, if you didn't think about that and you're here, I am not telling you to not bring it up. Definitely bring it up, but it is a little bit easier in advance. So, and it is never silly to ask, because sometimes it is not always clear, so please do that. And again, if something ever comes up, these are always up for discussion. With that, if when you're ready, and you can either, for those of you who like to do things digitally, you can scan these and send it to us via email, or you could just bring it in at your next meeting. But our objective is to collect these from each of you, please.
So it's not a sign this right now or you're out, I can read through the document
That is
again?
definitely not what I'm saying.
Yeah, getting out that easy.
Super not what I'm
Yeah.
saying. No, you can bring it next time. And then folks who will be appointed will also get this with their appointment letter.
You said you can pull up the Citizen's Guide to an Open Government. You can get that online. You
Yeah,
can
it should
pull all
have
that
been
up.
attached, but you can also
Yeah, I
get it
remember
on the
having it.
AG's website, the
Okay.
Attorney General's office.
Wouldn't mind going over it again. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's a really good document. I'll be honest, like, one of the things that I find the most interesting about Kansas, coming from a very Republican state to a fairly Republican state, is how undefined our open meetings language is. Like, it's really, really broad. And so I think at least being familiar with this is a really good start. And we try to always err on the side of caution.
Definitely. Questions, comments, concerns about it?
I would just share with the commission that you guys did receive an email digitally with the information, but you also have hard copies in your binders of all those documents that Mr. Skoll went over.
Which should include the Citizen's Guide to Open Government.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions regarding that one? No, I think we actually can open up to a public forum today. It looks like we actually have some public here. So we will move on to Section 4, Public Forum. If our guests here would like to speak or have you guys here. Glad to see the public and the community here. So come on up, my friend, come on up. State your name and let us know.
Hi, I'm Santiago Vasquez. I live in Salina, Kansas. Yeah, no, this is new.
Welcome.
I didn't know that meetings happened, so fortunately, we were informed of this, so we were here. But I guess just looking over some of the stuff that was happening, I mean, I don't necessarily know what the full purview of the Human Relations Commission is. But one thing that did pop into my head was I was wondering if the Human Relations Commission was in some way involved with the public forum that happened a while back on policing. I can't remember the exact date that was, but it was held at Sam's Chapel at KW. I just wanted to know if they were contacted to ensure, because I know we got some comments about how some of the presentations weren't like necessarily up to standard with the ADA, and there wasn't like the materials that were handed out were only in English, and those were some concerns that people had brought up. And I was wondering if the Human Relations Commission had been contacted, and if they hadn't, if in the future, for those kinds of public forums that concern specifically things that affect primarily marginalized communities, if they could be contacted and become more involved with that.
Oh, I would say we could definitely be contacted. I would have to defer to Julia. Were you guys contacted at all about that? Being involved in the public forum a while back? Lauren?
Well, I think those are both excellent suggestions, and I don't think those necessarily apply to an event that's just for marginalized people. That should be government in general. I can't flip a switch overnight. I think we are moving in that direction, and the conversations that we're having are helping that. I will say that, no, we were not. Were we involved? Were we aware? Yes. Was it our show to run? No. Is it the purview of this body to do that? I would not use the word purview or responsibility. Would it be uncalled for maybe you guys to ask about that, or to have that opportunity, or to share those suggestions? Those are all perfectly acceptable in purview, however you want to phrase that. I will say specifically related to that instance, I think things were moving quickly. And police department, city manager's office, in order to get that event pulled together, to get that information available, pulling a board together, trying to get that feedback. For instance, I can't just email you all and ask you to give me comments on anything besides your next meeting date, because that's a serial meeting.
Yeah.
So we would actually have to pull you guys in, which means we would have to have called a special meeting, which means I need at least 5 days to advertise and to get your packet together. So when we're working in tight timelines to try and deal with the urgency there, I don't think that's as easy. Now, as I mentioned, I think we need to continue this conversation. Yeah. And, maybe that's something that you as a board make those suggestions, whether it's from what you've heard in a public forum or you want to discuss this further, and then move those things forward. There are a couple different ways to do that. You could have it just formally acknowledged in your minutes. You could suggest a resolution. There are different things. And I think from a staff perspective, it always helps when we have specifics. So when you say not ADA accessible enough, are we talking about font, print, and size? Are we talking about the different types of availability? Are we talking about having somebody there for sign language or interpretations, those types of things? That it is definitely helpful to kind of have more detail. So
Shouldn't those things just automatically be thought of in an equitable environment in a public forum setting, especially represented by the city of Salina?
yes, in a perfect world, but there are many governments that you can go to right now, especially at our size, that aren't even starting to dabble in these things. I mean, the most standard, ADA accessibility besides buildings is really starting to become websites, and at least having those things mandatorily built into design. But typically, the bigger the city, the more you see those things, and it's not an excuse, but it is trying to kind of bring some of those standards and those resources to this scale. So when we talk about interpretation, when I say things like Babel, or, you know, there are services that you can call in and get interpretation, those types of things kind of on call. And if we do have something where we know we're going to have an issue, we do try to have somebody available or try to make secondary materials. And I think just in this case, there's a lot of fast movement going on, and maybe those things weren't considered, but those are good points, and we can look forward to those in the future. And if the board wants to make suggestions or, you know, further comments to the city manager's office or the city commission regarding those types of things, you know, that can be done.
I would definitely say that that'd be something that we should definitely look into more for going forward. If they have another public forum like that, that maybe they could consult with us or consult with the just the department and see what we could do to make it more inclusive, that public forum. You know, like you said, having multilingual, you know, paperwork and getting all that done, because that's something that these ladies could probably be like, oh, well, you need this, you need this, you need this. Give them like a checklist, so to speak, that they should follow to try to stay inclusive to everybody. So I would definitely, we need to look more into that.
And I will say, like, these conversations are important. I've been in government almost 20 years, and I'll tell you what's not helpful is the gotcha scenario.
Yeah.
There are so many people with different concerns and different needs that I'm going to be brutally honest, you can't possibly think of that come through the door every day. And your concern is important as much as their concern is important. And I don't know until you tell me.
Yep.
And so if you're in a meeting and you're like, I think we're missing the ball here, we should have had somebody for sign language, let us know. I mean, some of these things we're doing are new. We don't have, I think we're kind of novice at public involvement. And some of those things come back to what I was saying about our Open Meetings Act and just kind of, I think, some of the culture of how you do public involvement. And as we start to do some of these things, just the meeting was a big deal. Now thinking about how we make that meeting more accessible, it's a totally different kind of turn of the gears in the head. And
It shouldn't be, though, because policing affects the marginalized individuals of this community at an exponentially higher rate. So this is important. And I don't know, me personally, I moved back to Salina to make it a better place. And having these conversations and asking these questions and having this availability to me is very important and would make it a better place.
I don't know if I said it's not important.
No, I just wanted
Okay.
to tell you where I was coming
Okay.
from. And you just keep saying, oh, this is all new, and I'm not trying, and by saying that, I also want you to know I'm not trying to attack you. These are just very important things moving forward that need to be looked at.
Makes sense.
To answer the question that you raised, I did attend the forum at Kansas Wesleyan. I attended the event in Campbell Plaza, other events in town, and some of them within this last year have been actually sponsored by this agency, where we had a discussion about redlining and the diverse city event, the first one as well. So we're careful as a commission, if we're going there as, I went as an individual, and I did not visit with any of the other commissioners because of issues of open meetings. But in the past, during this meeting, we have talked about events upcoming that would interest people, that would find our typical agenda interesting. And so I think if the staff knew about that, I'm not opposed to announcing some upcoming events that are going on. And you've already heard our opinion about the outstanding staff we have, but.
Well, and just for the record, I mean, if you guys have events that you want to share, I mean, that's the reason that item is on the agenda.
Sure.
Public forum is an opportunity for people citizens share information with you. If somebody has an event happening, and, you know, one of the reasons we advertise meetings and there are packets available is if you know you want to share something with us, submit that it will go in the packet. So then, that's accessibility, because people are able to see that. Maybe they weren't able to be here, but they were able to look at the packet and see that information provided. So that is totally an option for
Certainly.
when you guys are liaisons
Yes.
out in the community. And sometimes one of the biggest barriers to government is just people's lack of knowledge about how it works. And so just sharing with them, look, this is where you find meeting dates. This is how often we meet. This is where you can watch those meetings online. This is where you can get the packet.
And some of our events were hit with COVID like everybody else's. We were looking at not just a book discussion on the color of law. If you haven't read that, it's a powerful, powerful book. And that kind of got waylaid by the COVID issue as well. So it's, as community members and people, I think we wouldn't serve on this board, to again answer your question, if we weren't interested in these issues. And I think now that you've seen the commission here, I think you might notice some of the same faces in some of these public events as well.
And we definitely welcome you to come anytime. And our meetings are always posted online, so you can definitely see when we're going to be meeting. And you guys are always welcome to come in here and let us know, because, again, especially when it comes to youth involvement and you guys planning and putting together things, if you've got something coming up yourselves even, and you want us to possibly be involved or let us know about, definitely come in and let us know. Because, again, with COVID, it's tough for all of us to be everywhere. And we only have 2 ladies in the office all the time, so it can be tough. But we thank you guys for coming up here. Did you have more? You come on up.
And just as I was saying earlier, the reason I bring this up is because I know that the city commission, and obviously this is still a huge learning process. The fact that, as an individual, I didn't know much about the HRC until very recently, and I didn't necessarily get involved with a lot of things that were happening in the community until very recently either. So this is all very new, and we would like to use our platforms and stuff to be able to spread that information more so that people can become more involved, because we do understand that a lot of what is lacking, at least in the community, seems to be the ability for people to know when things are happening, who is hosting them, why they're happening. And in some ways, a big part of our mission is to ensure that there is a solid network that allows for people to have access to that communication. We would like to help in any way we can. Obviously, we are always walking the line between what is and ought to be. And I think that is a very important question. As an individual, and I think as an organization, which I'm referring to the Sunflower Coalition, we like to really push for understanding that difference, but also always pushing for the ought of what ought to be, and understanding that, make continued conversation on how things can improve, and thinking of those ideas in ways that are concrete, and not dismissing them simply because they are, this is how, and I don't mean to specifically pick on anybody, but the common phrase is in a perfect world, just because it came up this time, and addressing how that kind of language and stuff, even though it is valid and important to address how things are, we always have to be pushing for how do we get to a perfect world? But the reason I brought it up is because the city commission had previously talked about having a second public forum on policing, and we suggested at the last meeting, and will continue to suggest, and we also wanted to find any other avenues where we can continue to push for this, having another public forum on policing, probably after September 21st, because that's the day that the City Commission is having their study session on the new Citizens Review Board and on the 1033 program. Because at the last public forum, and I say this simply because I feel like it's the more appropriate area to say it in, the public forum was overwhelmingly white. And the narratives that were coming out were either from people who would never have to experience the sort of discrimination that people of color and people of low income as well experience on the hands of police, but also people who were speaking on behalf of them as well from what they had learned, but not necessarily from their personal experience. So one thing that we are going to heavily push for is to ensure that if this second public forum happens, and we hope that it does, that there is a strong push to have the voices of people of color and of low-income communities there to be able to express what is going on and what needs to be fixed. Because I know that at the other city commissions too, where we've seen some backlash, people defending the police and saying that change should not happen, there's an overwhelming narrative that the police department right now is completely fine, and that there are no problems because they themselves have not seen them. And one way to address that is to bring people out and be like, look, this is my daily experience. I know that it's different from yours, but it's just as real. And I mean, once again, I'm still very new to this, but I think that the Human Relations Commission has a place in ensuring that that happens. And obviously, I'm open to always learning more information about the process and ensuring that everything happens according to procedure. And there's always, limiting factors to how much you can do as a governmental body versus as an external public body. But that is something that we'd be very interested in and would like, to help in any way and also get more information on.
I do have to start off and say you are a very well-spoken young man. Very well-spoken. Appreciate everything you had to say there. Kind of open it up. Anybody? Anything?
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
It's
thank
nice
you.
to not just be in an empty room for once. I like everyone here, but, it's good to see some community feedback. So
Yeah.
tell your friends, second
Yes,
Tuesday
and
of the month.
that's kind of where I was going with. It's all more about, not just us, but also the community getting out there and being vocal with each other and telling each other, hey, kind of like you guys did today. You came in, and you got to get up here and you got to talk and let us know some things. And that is, and just like Lauren says, it's the only way we can do it is keep that conversation going. No matter how much one side disagrees with the other, you got to keep the conversation going, and nothing will get solved by people getting mad and walking away from the table. So the conversation has to stay. Whether you're for police change or we're against police change, you have to have that conversation. So, and I would even take that beyond policing and go into just governmental in general. Housing. We've been dealing with this since housing started. It's been, it's a constant struggle, and it's not just in the policing that people are being marginalized in. It's the housing, it's the jobs, it's just everyday in general things. And that's what a lot of what we deal with is the broader spectrum of things. We don't see a lot of, we don't deal with the policing side of things. We don't, we just talked about today trying to get involved and have that partnership where we do some training and things like that. But I'll tell you this, I don't know a lot about Salina Police Department, but I do know most police departments go through a lot of diversity training. It's just, what is that training? Is it current? Is it up to date? Is it outdated? Which, it might be. But it's something that I think as a commission I would like to see us maybe look into a little bit more, but I don't know what our reach is there. Our reach is more, again, into housing, into the jobs, and things like that. So I don't know where we're going to be able to go with, but I would definitely like to be more involved in the conversation as a whole, and be able to be involved and maybe offer insight into how those groups can create more inclusiveness for everybody. Like you said, have those, the paperwork in multi-language, and have someone in sign language. And again, and I'm not going to use the imperfect world, but it is true that, with given time, if you're given time to prepare for something, we can get those things arranged and do those kind of things. But with COVID and everything that has happened, it's kind of all, and just in general, this whole atmosphere in our country it's been boiling for years and years and years, but it's kind of hitting that head right now. And so I think a lot of people don't know what to do. They don't know how to go about it. But I think by keeping the conversation going, by keeping people like you guys coming in and talking and going to these forums and keeping us aware of what's going on, that's the best way to do it. So I thank you for coming in here and talking, and hopefully we can be more involved going forward, for sure. All right. that it? You're the only one, did you want to? Okay, good deal. I was just making sure, I didn't want to leave anybody out, man, didn't want to leave anybody out. That kind of concludes the public forum side of things. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to add? Julia?
I would just remind the commission that our next meeting is October 13th
Okay.
of 2020.
Okay. Well then, if that's said, then I would have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All approve, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.